Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 15 of the Match Show, TMS. And today we are welcoming back to the show Heidi Briones, who ran for Congress in Oregon's first congressional district. She was endorsed by Andrew Yang. She was endorsed by Humanity Forward. Unfortunately, came up short, Heidi, but I think there's a lot to take away from your run. And I think people are very excited about what you're going to do next, and also perhaps what advice that you would have for people who I think you inspired in your congressional run. Because for people who don't know, we were just talking about it during the pre-show. Andrew Yang dropped out on February 11th. The next day, you were an average Yang ganger. The next day, you decided to just run for Congress, and you got it far enough to have the big dog, say, I endorse Heidi Briones. She would be the best candidate for Oregon's first congressional district. I just want to ask you first, what do you take away from the results of your run? You obviously came up short, but you did get to second place. You had thousands and thousands of Oregonians, is that how you say it? show up to vote for you. What do you take away from the run now that it's been about 10 days or so, and you've had some time to think about it a little?
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, I wanted to win. That's obviously the goal. But I'm not naive. I knew that the most likely scenario would be coming up short of a plurality in that race. She is a strong incumbent. She has a large base of support here. I knew it was going to be tough. So when I saw the results, I wasn't that surprised. I actually thought I would come in second when I was leading up to election day. People would ask me, I'm like, I think I'll come in a strong second, was honestly sort of where I felt that I was at. So when I saw the results, I wasn't that surprised. I thought that I would have more of a percentage, though, to be honest, based on the feedback we were getting and internal data. I was expecting closer to 20%. Response, and we're at about 7% currently, with still 20% to come in. So yeah, I wasn't fully shocked that we ended where we were as far as second place. And what it meant to me is that given just 3 months of time to campaign, and even less if you look at when I actually was able to start fundraising, and when I actually had a decent website up and actually was phone banking and text banking, we had even less time, probably more like 10 weeks or less. So in that amount of time, fully digital during COVID-19, we were able to get, like you said, thousands of Oregonians to vote for me, a virtual nobody who they had never heard of. I haven't even lived in Oregon for 2 years. They voted on my message and what we were getting out there about universal basic income. So to me, that's proof of concept. And that's something that's important in campaigning. It's very similar to businesses where you need a proof of concept. Is this going to work? And so I think that I provide a really good proof of concept for Yang Gang candidates who are like, I want to run, I want UBI, I want to push forward Andrew's message. And I think that it's great that they can do that. And if they have more time and more money and more resources, then imagine what we could do. So I'm glad that I provided some proof of concept for what we're doing and that it's possible.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that is almost like the legacy of your run, is just showing that the average person can put themselves out into the public eye and try to make a difference in their own community, and really do what is, I think, the best way to make a difference in your community, which is run for Congress. Because really, everyday people should be able to just run for Congress, right? It shouldn't really be these, whatever people who are already in some sort of family or associated with money. You know what I mean? I think going off of that, I think even if you don't win. We saw this with Andrew's campaign, people are still exposed to the ideas, right? So even though the 7% of people who voted for you, they're full on UBI, human-centered capitalism, humanity first, all of that. And then a lot of people, they get exposed to new ideas where in perhaps a future run, or maybe in a 2024 Yang run, they're more open to these ideas. And also the fact that I think these congressional races, they really are making an impact, where Andrew said yesterday that they're he's having Congress people reach out to him being like, Andrew, please don't endorse my congressional opponent. How can I prevent you from doing this? And he's like, well, you got to endorse UBI, like cash relief bill. So it's making so many differences, win or lose. So like, I think perhaps some people were a little disappointed because it's just like they want to win so badly. You know what I mean? And I think, but I just think like it's important to remind everyone, like, be patient, because everything that we're doing and everything that you did is making such a huge difference.
Yeah, it takes some time. There's, like I tell people, there's a lot of different ways to win a race. So if you take somebody, that's a virtual unknown and runs on a platform that's still, unknown to a lot of people, and they're able to push that forward and make a dent and get, thousands of people to vote for them, then that's big. And that pushes everything forward. I mean, think about if Andrew hadn't run, like, where would we be right now on universal basic income? We would not be where we are now with, people actually proposing bills. And, actually, I think the $1,200 stimulus was from his run. I mean, the idea of putting cash into people's hands is now a topic. And without people continuing that message, I don't think that our movement will continue with momentum. So momentum is so important to things like this. We can't die out, because then we risk becoming a fringe movement that just kind of existed for a period of time and then everybody forgot about it. So that's another thing is if people are inspired to run, then that's amazing. And that keeps our movement going and we keep that momentum going. And that was why it was so important for me to run right after he dropped out, because I'm like, oh, I can use this momentum, and timing is so important with these things. And so we have to continue doing that. We can't let the momentum lapse.
Mm-hmm. What someone asked it earlier, was Trumper for Yang. It was, I'm catching the beginning of Heidi's live stream on time again, so he's super happy. Heidi is great, has a great future. She is very impressive, smart, and willing to work across the aisle. She must run again. Would you ever run for Congress again?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I just have to look at what that path would look like. I've thought about it. I've done some research on whether it would make more sense to run again for this seat, or run for example, a state seat, and then kind of build more name recognition, do some good things for the community here, pass some good legislation, and then be able to run again for the U.S. level. Or possibly just go ahead and run again at the U.S. level. Yeah, I wish that I had, I guess like a magic wand, or I could just tell, what the best move would be forward. I mean, when it comes down to it, what I really want to do is make UBI a reality. I want to get these policies passed. And if my role in that is by being a representative and pushing it on that level, then great. If my role in it is something else, then great too. Either way, we just need to continue doing this. So I have to look and see where I'm going to be most effective at that given time point. And I think that this last round, it was most effective for me to run. That was the thing that I could do and push things forward. I don't know if in 2022 that will be the most effective thing at that time yet. But of course, when it comes to that, I'll make a logical decision based on the facts that are in front of me.
Well, I know whatever you do, you're going to have the full support of the Yang Gang behind you. So,
well, that's awesome. I definitely appreciate it. I wouldn't have been able to do anything without the Yang Gang. That was the whole point. So it was an experiment to me. I was like, oh, can I use this momentum to run for office? And could we possibly win? Could we make a huge dent at the very least? Could I get thousands of votes? Could I get people learning about UBI and excited about it? And I think that we did a great portion of that besides winning. But it's like, it doesn't matter. We're still going and we're still here. And as long as I can push forward universal basic income and make this a reality sooner than later, because we need it. And it's only becoming more and more obvious literally daily now. Like, it's not even a joke.
Yeah,
like, it's just every single day. It's just like, it just gets crazier and crazier. I mean, 2020 has just been the biggest trip of my life. So it's clear.
We're only what 5 months into the 2020, but it feels like a decade's gone by already.
Yeah, I've aged a lot. We all have. We have extra gray hair, and we're we're getting ready for the future. But as long as we keep moving forward and don't give up, then we're doing the right thing.
Yeah, I think the key thing during times like these is to try to still have hope, because it really can be kind of dystopian at times. Just when you look out in the world and you kind of just want to crawl under a rock because what you see makes you so disappointed and upset?
It is. It's very disappointing and upset. And if you're involved in politics, I can tell you it's a fine line between speaking out and being an activist and talking about all these issues, and then also worrying about your own mental health and bandwidth and what you can actually handle as a human being. Because we're not just public figures; we're all human, and we all have our own struggles that we're going through daily. I worked full time during the entire campaign, so I was still having normal day-to-day job stress, and I had a boss talking to me, and so that hasn't gone away. All the normal life stress is still there. I'm one of the lucky people that does still have a job right now, but a lot of people don't, and that can really get everybody down and bring people down. So I just want us to focus on what we can do. Stay proactive, get involved in campaigns that you care about, that are local to you or that you just are passionate about. If we keep doing that, we'll continue to move this needle and we'll see it happening.
I think that's a great advice. And Astro says, Heidi, thanks for following me on Twitter. Can't wait to see what you do in the future. SR says, you have to lose before you can win. Many brave people have to fall on the altar before we can see fire. Thank you, Heidi, for a great campaign.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And thank you. Thank you for your support.
You talked about it a little bit there in terms of the fact that even when you run for Congress, you still have, whatever was happening before in your life, whether it was a job struggle or mental health struggles, caring for your family members, all the concerns that every single person has, right? It's not like when you become a politician that goes away. I want to know what it was like trying to balance that with what almost becomes a second job, maybe even more so, running for office and having to also put yourself out into the public spotlight in a way that perhaps you never would before. What was that experience like, and what advice would you maybe have for people that are interested in going down a similar path where that might be something they'd be exposed to?
Yeah, I would say have more money. That's just is a good starting point. If you have, I'd say, I don't know, 5 to 10K coming into it, then you can really set up some structures that really relieve that stress for yourself. I didn't have any of that. I came in with zero and completely, had to raise money before I could do anything. So that's what a lot of my stress and struggles came from, was actually trying to get the money together. So if you're going to do this kind of a venture, I would suggest getting some money together first, whether it's from family members or whatever, pulling together some resources so you can self-fund a little bit right from the jump. That'll really, clear up a lot of hurdles for you as far as stress and still having to have a job and other things, which a lot of congressional candidates still have to work a job, especially female congressional candidates. A lot of them don't have the luxury of leaving their job. Either the job that they had didn't pay enough or whatever else. So I would say, have some funding coming in. And then after that, hire your finance person first before anybody else. You need to hire somebody that knows how to raise money, because that money is going to run out almost immediately. And if you don't have cash flow coming in, you can't make any decisions. No decisions can be made. People are like, when are you going to do this? I'm like, I don't know, because I don't know how much people are going to donate this next week. So, so you need to have somebody that's their sole focus. I would say for a novice congressional campaign, that's more important than a campaign manager or other positions that you might want to be filling. I would say the finance is the most important. Having somebody that just focuses on how to reach out to donors, innovative ways to raise money as a grassroots candidate. All of that's super important. So I would say, have some more money and have somebody constantly going out and trying to find you money. Because if you have money, your decisions are like this. That's just how it is. That's why we support UBI and people having that cash flow coming in consistently, because you can plan ahead. Same goes for your campaign. So focus on that first. Focus on how you're going to raise money and be very innovative and creative and open to ways to raise that.
Yeah, it sounds like you're saying go into it with a plan,
Yes, absolutely go into it with a plan. Make sure you have support. I did have support from the UBI caucus, from other Yang Gang. That was very important. I had a lot of people I could reach out to. make sure you have your network of people that support you. And some of them should be just like fans of yours, just like they could just tell you like you're awesome. And some of them should be people that are more critical, you know, and they're going to tell you when you're messing up or things that you need to do. And some of them, you know, are just going to be logistic people that can just help you with certain tasks. Like, hey, I need this done. Can you do this for me? And they just do it. And there's no emotion or drama or anything else or control. They just will help you out. So you need to set up a whole structure. And that's one of the things I struggled with. I'm not the most naturally organized person. And so to put together structures like that was very difficult for me. I'm much better being, you know, the person with the energy, going out and talking to people, getting them motivated and inspiring them to do things. And, you know, keeping momentum going is my thing, but not the back end of it. So I definitely struggled there. And I would find, you know, second after your finance person is find somebody to make sure you're incredibly organized and you know your schedule, you know exactly what's going on, you know what to do next, you know what's going to happen at what time, and the timelines of things are very important because there were times where we just ran out of time to do things that we wanted to do, and that sucked because we're like, crap, people are already getting their ballots. And then I got endorsed by Andrew and I had a big fundraising day, but it was like the timing was like not right, you know. It was like, okay, that happened a little bit too late, so now we didn't get a lot of things out before people got their ballots, and that was a struggle. So it comes down to organization and money, most things.
That makes complete sense. Yeah. And one of the when I first had you on, I think it was back in late February or early March. It was after this, I had interviewed you. It was like an hour and a half long. And I wrote on Twitter right afterwards and I was like, man, these interviews are kind of fun. I want to do these all the time. So in a way, it was actually you that inspired the Matt Show live.
The Matt Show. I think I should get like in the credits or something for that. Like, I don't know. I should have a special category in your credits.
That makes sense. I should add it in the bottom of the description each episode. Inspired by Heidi Briones. But I think so personally, what I take away from that is you've inspired me in a way. And I imagine that there's a lot of people who also feel inspired by your run just because of the uniqueness of it and what you were able to do. Besides on like the organizational level, was there ever perhaps a moment during the campaign? I think one thing that people fear when they go out and put themselves out there and into the public is kind of the blowback that you can get. You can, you know, you say something on Twitter, suddenly your opinion or what you think, you can get a mob comes at you. And if it can be kind of like scary, you know, do you have any advice on, is that ever something I guess that you had to deal with? And maybe if so, would you have any advice on dealing with it?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely get a lot of blowback being a public figure. I think people tried to cancel me probably a dozen times like, throughout the campaign for completely different reasons. Like, first I'm a socialist, and then I'm not far enough to the left. I'm like, well, which is it? Like, I don't understand. Like, what is it? I confuse a lot of people and I think that Yang does as well, and our movement does as well. So I think that was one thing. And I mean, some of it I just laughed off. There's some things that are just completely ludicrous and you can just kind of laugh at. Some things you just kind of mute and you just don't pay attention. And other things you engage, you know, and sometimes people will be like, don't engage with that person. And I'd be like, well, I'm going to make the executive decision to do it because like I have my point to make here and I think it's important. But, you know, I think it's just being a public figure is not something that Sorry about the background noise. Being a public figure is not something that I ever dreamed about being. Like, I didn't do any of this for any accolades or to be a star. So that part, I don't necessarily like it. It doesn't come super natural to me. I prefer having a lot more of a private life. So as far as dealing with it, just have somebody you can vent to. Unfortunately, my wife is my main source of venting. So thanks, honey. And sorry, she's like putting away the dishes now. So that's what's going on. But yeah, I would say essentially have somebody that's got your back. And then also what's really cool thing you can do on like social media is have people volunteer to just like watch your posts kind of and respond to people that are saying things that are ridiculous. Like maybe have a few people that you can be like, hey man, you got my back. Like just watch if there's anything that's like, you know, ridiculous. And like, you can deal with that for me. Just so you don't get yourself caught into, trolls and horrible things as a candidate. That's something I struggle with because I like to be very active on social media. I like to respond to everything ideally. I like to like go into it. But that doesn't always work so well as a candidate. You don't have the time for all that. It's incredibly time consuming and just a waste of your energy. So I would say have somebody to manage you on that and to call you out and be like, you don't need to respond to that. I got you on this one. Or, have some people doing that for you.
Yeah, just lightening the load just a little bit by little to try to have some more time just to relax, perhaps. Or even do, some hardcore heavy lifting campaign work.
Yeah. I wish I would have taken more time to relax and do things that are fun, but coronavirus, there's not really a whole lot like super fun activities to do right now that everybody's experiencing. And there's economic insecurity. So it's not like I'm going to go and spend a bunch of money doing anything or try to do retail therapy. I'm saving my pennies like everybody else because we don't know what's going on right now and what the future holds. So I would say have fun with it, though. I mean, it should be fun. I mean, actually campaigning is incredibly fun. It's not that there's certain things that are hard work and very stressful. But for the most part, you should be having fun because you're promoting yourself and your ideas at the same time. You're putting your personality into this. This is like your time to tell people what you really think and how you think things should go down and what you think is BS. And if you can get that across in a good way, then people like it. And I think that's what people resonated with my campaign was I was just coming from a real place. I'm like, I'm sick of this kind of stuff and I'm going to give it a go and see what we can do.
Yeah. I've been thinking of this idea that is, we have the Yang Gang is capable of doing incredible things. We've already done a lot of incredible things. What about having 435 people run for all 435 seats of Congress in 2022, minus, of course, the seats that we win this time around? Go David Kim and some others. Do you think that's like a good idea to try to do something like that? Because I think there's such an appetite for change in the country right now. I think people are really starting to get realize like how screwed up the system is. And one thing I saw this morning was on the Hill, they had a poll where apparently the top issue going into this election isn't actually healthcare. It isn't actually the economy. It's not even race issues. It's government corruption. That's apparently what's on the minds of people right now. And I know that Yang had such a great, I think the best of any candidate, democracy reform, government reform package, just a side point. But what do you think in terms of trying to organize something like that?
I'm 100% for it. And I've said a few times that I'm happy to take leadership on that role. I mean, I think that I have a unique perspective and experience that I could really share with a new candidate who's a complete novice, who has no idea what the heck to do. Logistically, I could tell them things to do, but I could also like mentor them in that way. And so I think it's a great idea. And I would love to run something like that. I mean, Humanity Forward, if you're listening, you should hire me because I could help you in this manner a lot. So I think it's very important. We need to recruit. Recruiting is going to be really important. I don't know if we're running for every seat is the way to go.
I just like possibly. To be grand.
No. Well, I was thinking going through every state and finding a local race, a state race, and a federal race that are all winnable. We'd have to do a little research and see, is this incumbent strong? Do they have opposition? Does anybody run for the seat? Do they just run unopposed and nobody really likes them, but they get some votes and they win? So we need to find those seats and be very strategic and then have somebody running in each state at each level on UBI, on these issues. And then I think that's a real wave because if we get a bunch of people to win some local seats, great. Those people are our future Congress people. If we get some people to win state races, great. Maybe we find some innovative ways to do state UBI. Maybe there'll be a state that it could work in. And then we get a state UBI and then it trickles into a national one. So there's so many different things that we could do, but I think we should be at all levels. I think it'll be beneficial to the movement to have somebody, at least one person in each state at all levels, and we'll support them. It might be too much for us to support like a billion candidates. So we have to be strategic, but we have to pick the ones that are like, this is so winnable. Like we can definitely get this and flip it and do some crazy good and and that would be a lot of press. Like what if it was like, oh wow, like a gang person won in every state, at these levels. Like, that would be a crazy story. So I like where you're going with it, and I would love to help and, possibly lead the way on it.
Yeah, well, that's great to hear, and I do completely agree with you in terms of it's a much better idea to be strategic and analytic. I just like to be grand and dramatic with my ideas.
Well, that's good too.
But,
yeah.
But that's actually what you referenced is one of the things I like that Humanity Forward's doing now is they have endorsed, Jermaine Johnson in South Carolina. There was the woman in Arizona. They had a bureau council member, I think, or bureau president in Queens. So I like seeing that because it goes to show that that's something that they would do in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that that's something that they want to do. I know that they're obviously limited with resources and, just humans and volunteers and ways to make that happen. And they need help. They need help with the recruiting side of it. So one of my ideas was to find these candidates and kind of mentor them on my own, and then get them to do the Humanity Forward pledge. Be like, hey, take this pledge. That's the first step, basically. Do you believe in these values? And if they take the pledge, then encourage them to, sign up for an endorsement, or even more than that, maybe even offer them some actual training so that when somebody is endorsed by Humanity Forward, that's somebody that's trained also, maybe a Humanity Forward certification program, which a lot of organizations have for people that they endorse. They go through a little training program, and then they're ready, and then they know that candidate's going to be strong, and they know what to do, and they're not leaving them hanging out to dry. Because an endorsement's great, but you have to actually know how to win and be able to know the things that you need to know to get to where you want to go. So I think that there's a little bit of a training element missing. And yeah, I'd love to help with that and make sure that these candidates know what they're doing and come in strong and can win.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things I also wanted to talk about with you a bit about is kind of what's going on in the news right now with just the crazy period that we're in. Just kind of what we were talking about earlier, 2020. What a crap show.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts, I guess, on the last few days with the protest in Minneapolis sparked by the murder of George Floyd by the police officer?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's just disgusting and horrible what happened to George Floyd. I can't even believe it. I mean, just so many factors about what happened. He was killed by that police officer, and it was awful. And people watched it happen in broad daylight. It's on video, which is the good part. I'm really glad somebody filmed it and was able to capture that because that happens all the time. And I've seen it happen my whole life. I was born in the 80s, grew up in the 90s. I lived in LA. There were LA riots with Rodney King. I was been there for this, and it's not going anywhere until we fix the problem. We need massive systemic change. It's clear that there's, racism, systemic racism in our police force, in our government in general. I think that it's clear that we need to do something about it. And as far as what's happened afterwards, I have to say that I understand. I understand people being that upset and feeling like no one listens to them unless they, burn it down. And there's going to be people that are going to do that more and more as they're more economically desperate, more, feel like there's racial injustice and there's no justice for them. All of these things are going to compound. And you will see more unrest like this. It's hard. I don't really condone or condemn it in a way. I don't think that these people should be punished for the actions during what's happening. I think that that's too extreme. I'm a favor of nonviolent protest myself. I've been involved in a lot of activism groups that did a lot of protesting, and we were able to make a lot of change through nonviolent protests. So I am a big supporter of that. I believe that it's incredibly possible to do it that way. But I also understand feeling like no one's listening to you until you blow something up. I get that too. So I have a lot of compassion and empathy for the situation that's going on. And I think it's just horrible. And if we don't do something to fix it, it's only going to get worse and worse and worse. So I think that, reparations is a step in that direction. We also need systemic change of the police force. There's a lot of things that need to change there as far as our hiring practices, firing practices, police unions, and other things. So yeah, I don't have a clear answer on where to move forward from here, but I am, angry. I'm sad about it. I'm worried. I'm scared. I mean, I feel all these emotions that everybody feels right now because it's bad. I mean, it's not it's not a position that we want to be in as a country where you have a Black American who is killed by a police officer, and it happens all the time. And it's coming more to light, and it's going to come more and more to light as information is more easily dispersed, as we're seeing now. So maybe it's a good thing in the long run. Maybe bringing everything to light will hopefully lead somewhere good. That's my hope. That's like how I'm hopeful about it. But right now it's bad, and we need to do something about it, and we need leadership that will actually do something. And I don't believe Trump provides that leadership based on his response thus far. I found it very disturbing.
Yeah.
So I'd like to see somebody in there who would give real leadership at this time. That would be amazing.
Yeah, I think you were spot on, and I agree completely with everything you said. I see it as just a institutional failure, a societal failure from top to bottom. I see what happened last night and the days prior and ongoing right now even as kind of just the perfect boiling point for something like this to happen. Like, I feel like just this was bound to happen when you have pervasive underlying economic disparities to such a large degree that's gone unaddressed for decades.
Yeah.
You have this issue with, so like I don't know, like when you said at the end there to like you're hopeful that this will be the moment for change. It's hard to be hopeful right now because it's happened so many times, and it feels like just a few.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like it was just a few weeks ago we were talking about Ahmaud Arbery, who just got shot for jogging. And like another thing I think about when this happens is like how when these events happen, we don't unite together as a country. We just become more polarized and more divided. People just retreat further into into their tribes. There becomes this argument in some circles on the right where it's like, oh, but he walked in at a place he wasn't supposed to go before he got shot. Oh yeah, let's just start shooting everybody who takes $5 from someone. Like, it's sure or not, it doesn't matter at all. Like, and it's just it's a really scary situation, and I kind of just see it as all the more reason that we need change at such a drastic level. And I really do think it falls on leadership, whether it's the president, Congress, because I think it's all just tied together. And I loved what you said when you said you don't condone or condemn the protesting, because I'm kind of in the same sense. Like, obviously I don't think it's good to burn down buildings and stuff, but it's like at the same time, how like people are so angry that stuff like this is happening. People are so angry that it takes 4 days when to arrest a police officer. Like, it's just it doesn't make any sense to me at all. And it's really disappointing.
That's very disappointing. And I mean, I said it before, like I'm against rioting. Like, I don't think that's a good thing, but like, I understand why they're doing it. And there's nuance to this. And when you said about polarization, I completely agree. And it's very sad that the country seems to become more polarized when these things do come to light. And you see it very clearly when it's like, you're either for the protesters or you're like against them completely. And it's like, well, there's a lot of nuance here. Like, I'm for, like I definitely agree with why they're so mad. And I think that that's really messed up. And I also am in favor of nonviolent protests. Like, that's just something, I'm just in favor of nonviolence, and I'm anti-war. I'm in favor of nonviolence. I don't believe the state should be killing anybody. A riot is the language of the unheard. And I think that's very important. And, MLK was, until like the end of his life, he did become more radical, but for most of his life, he was very, very nonviolent. He did start to have some ideas of, there may be some merit to violence and protest towards the end of his life, which a lot of people don't know. Some people don't know. And Malcolm X actually went the other way and thought like, maybe nonviolence is actually a better way towards the end of his life. So I think that there's a lot of nuance to this issue, and I wish that people wouldn't become more divided. I really hope that people don't start to just cancel anybody, that doesn't have their exact viewpoint on it. I hope that we can listen to each other and see how we can move forward together. It's going to take everybody to actually make these changes. They're not going to be easy. They're going to be hard fought because these systems are entrenched. literally since the founding of our country, some of them. And it's going to take a lot to do. That's why I love reparations. I really do, because I think that that's a concrete way that you start to move forward on an issue, is economically. I mean, people are going to notice if you send them money for a reason, and if it's, you know, for good reason, to try to make things right. You know, that's a direction that we need to move forward, because it's only going to get more desperate.
Mm-hmm. I want to talk about reparations for a second, because I'll be completely honest. If you had asked me 3 months ago what I thought of reparations, I had a lot of concerns with it, because I didn't understand how you decided who got the money. I didn't understand how you decided who paid for it. Like, there's just a lot of variables at play. And then there's also like the argument, well, like, what about someone who wasn't even here 150 years ago when slavery existed? Why should they have to pay into some sort of reparations fund? But then it was in a conversation with David Kim on my channel where I think he kind of convinced me to change my mind, which I never thought I would change my mind on something like this, because apparently after slavery ended, the federal government had promised every single slave like something like a certain amount of acres and like one animal or something. And like, it wasn't just like something that was said, it was like actually like a law. And that kind of just changed my whole thinking on it, because that's kind of the way I function, is like, okay, well, it's like a principle. It becomes then like, well, the government literally said they were going to do this, so they have to live up to their promise. And it's deeper than just like, and so I don't know, I still have the same concerns as before, but I've moved in the pro column, which kind of surprises me.
Yeah, I mean, I understand those concerns. I actually had a lot of the same as well. Like, how do we figure this out? But they've actually, you know, a lot of really smart people, smarter than myself, have done a lot of research on this, on how you would trace it back and why it's so necessary, including what you mentioned. And even without that, I mean, even if they wouldn't have been promised anything, I mean, they freaking deserve something.
Yeah,
I mean, come on.
I completely agree that they deserve something.
Like, yeah.
I just always had this like implementation concern.
Yeah.
But
I get
like
that.
when I heard that, like, literally it was something that the government like promised they had to do, that kind of pushed me over the edge. I don't know. So I don't know.
No, it makes sense.
Just interesting. I've kind of moved on that issue, and I guess I don't know. It's such a it's such like a crazy issue politically. It's just another one that gets everybody kind of retreats to their tribes, and I'm just trying to understand like both sides, I guess.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, I think if you understand the value of something like UBI or a dividend or payments, then I think that reparations they do fit into that. I mean, even though it's not a universal thing, it fits into the idea of, you know, we live in capitalism, people need money, and people are owed a dividend for the work that they put into this nation, you know? And if you worked for free for a long span of time, you would want some payment at the end, once they deemed that that was a human rights violation and completely, you know, wrong, and all the damage that is done. I think that you deserve, you know, a payout. I mean, it happens in a job. If you leave a job and they lay you off after 10 years, you know, they all offer you a severance package. We're okay with that, you know. We're okay with wrongs being righted with money or financial payments or some kind of stipend in a lot of other situations. You know, in America, we're so sue happy, and what happens with the lawsuit? You get some money at the end and then you feel better. You're like, all right. So to me, it's just very natural. I think it's a very, you know, good resolution that everybody will be able to kind of concretely deal with, and then we'll move on. Now we're like after reparations, and I feel like that will be a different point in time in our timeline. That's the hope, is that we can change the timeline through that.
I was texting with some of my friends, my gaming friends, but somehow we got into politics, and we were talking about this kind of exact same thing, just in terms of like what can be done to try to prevent something like this happening in the future. How do we address this issue of profiling and racism and policing and police brutality and just all the polarization and division that comes with it? And reparations would be one, and obviously I think UBI would be another. But I think at the end of the day, you can only throw cash at a problem so much.
We obviously need a lot more done.
And then that's honestly that's the hard part, because then I try to think what can be done in like an individual like police department level by police department level, and it seems really hard, because I think ultimately it's this is what my friend said in the argument. You can have all the best cops in the world, but all it takes is one cop to be bad, and it creates an environment where if people, it seems impossible for me to not know that there's like a cop that does some shady stuff and is misbehaving and abusing his power, and it's the culture within these departments, and that's something that seems extremely hard to change. But I want to find a solution to it, because obviously
I have some ideas. I mean, that's going to be really hard. I do have some ideas. I mean, some of it has to do with basically who they're hiring to be police officers. I actually went to a school that was predominantly white. It was a Christian evangelical high school, and there were a lot of problems with racism in that school. Like, actually people flying Confederate flags and, outwardly using like the N-word to talk to people and thinking it was okay. This was happening, I mean, in the 90s at the school that I went to, and it was a huge problem. And I'm sad to say that a lot of those boys that were involved in that kind of stuff went on to be police officers. And that's that's disturbing to me. So what I think is we need to be more careful about who we're hiring to work in that field. That's not something that should be taken lightly. I think that we need to put more respect and reverence onto the position and have it be something that's a little more difficult to get into. One of my ideas was to have somebody serve for a year in an underserved community before they can become a police officer. So whether that's being a teacher, whether that's being a social worker, something that's non-punitive at all, like something that's actually helping people in that community so they can get to know, an underserved part of either their community or maybe another one that needs help. Either way, they should be exposed to different cultures. A lot of police officers have a high school education. Now that there is a bit, stricter guidelines in certain offices, but grand majority still have less education than other fields. And I think that that's a problem. I mean, if you get somebody who has not very much education, you pay them a little bit, and then you give them a gun and you say, okay, you're the boss. Like, that's really, I mean, what you're telling them, it's like, here's a weapon and you're the boss of this area and you're the authority. That's a bit scary if that person doesn't have the maturity or the life experience to understand that culture and that community. Then they start to see people as less than. They're like, this person's not as human as I am. They're a criminal. They're in a different category because they don't know their story. They don't know what poverty is like. They haven't experienced that. So I definitely think that no one's first public service job should be punitive in any manner. Of course, we need to change the actual structure of police officers to make their job less punitive overall. But I think a good way to fix that would be to have those strict hiring standards. And we're not hiring anybody that hasn't, helped an underserved community first before they go and be an authority for that community.
That's actually a really great idea. I haven't heard that before. I mean, you hear being more stringent on hiring practices, but actually having an idea, you have to serve 1 year in a thing that's like the opposite of enforcement. It's, because I do think what tertiary here says, policing attracts a certain type. I think that is true to some degree. Like there's definitely some people that they enjoy power, I guess.
Yeah.
And with power comes responsibility, and not everybody's responsible. And then this is interesting. Trumper for Yang, Trump, which I think the name says it all. There's precedence of reparations from the World War II Japanese being interned. It is a topic that we must look into, coming from a crazy Republican.
Yeah.
And I lean a little to the right myself. So I think it's full enlightenment here that me and Trumper are both on board with reparations. Like
Everybody's coming around.
We don't that, and I don't know. That goes like the whole conversation of how like labels and like the parties. Like I just don't really think they really work anymore. I It's
No, I hate it. I really hate it. Yeah.
Like one thing I think about immigration is like another one of these issues that it's been an issue for decades and decades, and nobody's want to solve it. And it seems like each party's more interested in using it as a club come election time every 2 years rather
Yeah.
than actually solve the issue. And that's why I'm so on board with trying to get all these congressional candidates into office, because what we have now isn't working. Like the people that have just been in DC for decades and haven't done a damn thing to solve anything. It enrages me.
Oh, me too. And I mean,
yeah.
it's on purpose. I mean, it's just like the parties unfortunately purposely put people into these seats and fund them and give them resources that they know they can control. And when you're kind of running, you kind of see that kind of stuff, and you're like, okay, I see what's going on here. And people are so far removed from the people they're representing. Like you have people that are in their 60s and 70s that are millionaires, and they're supposed to represent like their districts that, are rural and poor, or, working class, or whatever it is, or different, totally different backgrounds. And they just frankly don't care. They kind of write it in because so many people do that becomes like the job. The job becomes all about fundraising and all about, kind of pandering and looking cool and like virtue signaling, and you're not getting any work done. And it is infuriating. It's very infuriating. And I want more regular people like myself to run, because we need more non-politicians in politics. That's really what it comes down to. At some point, I do believe it's corruptible. I don't know what exact point that is. And it depends on the personality of the person, of course, going into it, how corruptible they are by nature. But we know power corrupts. I mean, that's just human psychology. So it depends on how strong that person's character is, whether they're able to be corrupted. But I do think the grand majority of people will be corrupted through the system that we currently have. And we need a lot of huge democracy reform, which hopefully that becomes the next big issue, is actually just fixing the way our democracy works. So you don't have this corruption, term limits, democracy dollars, getting this dark money out of politics. These are all things that'll start moving that way. Ranked choice voting, star voting, all of this are things that we need to look at.
I agree 100%. I don't want to put you on the spot here, but is there perhaps a candidate, another Yang Gang candidate running for Congress that you've taken a particular interest in? Besides, I'm sure all of them, but are there perhaps anyone in specific that you're looking at that you maybe see some elements of your own campaign and their campaign that you're excited about? Without trying to alienate anybody. Can't leave anyone out.
There's a lot of them. I mean, everybody's at a different stage. I always have a soft spot for underdogs and people just getting started. And those are the people I feel like I can help the most. So I am curious about Noelle Famera in Hawaii and her race running to replace Tulsi's seat. I think that people like her possibly, and other people that are, maybe haven't gained as much traction because they weren't necessarily as plugged into the Yang Gang, still deserve our support and still deserve us to look into them and try to help them and see what we can do, because we need to broaden. We need to be more accepting. So somebody needs to feel, I think it's really important if somebody feels like, hey, I want to run on UBI and these humanity forward policies, but I'm not in the Yang Gang. Like, I don't really know. I'm just kind of like out of it. Like, I haven't been on social media or the internet. Nobody knows who I am. Well, I want them to feel welcomed. And to know that, like, if you're an underdog, like, we're going to take you in, we're going to take care of you, we're going to help you out, we're going to do what we can to get you to that next level, to where you can be endorsed by Andrew or Humanity Forward. So I'm most interested in helping those candidates. So I'm really interested in Noelle's campaign, and I would like to see her take Tulsi's spot, because that's going to be an open seat, and Tulsi is pro-UBI. So I don't want to see that seat flip to somebody who's not going to support UBI when I know Tulsi would. When it came down to it. So that's something that I care about. And she might be a little less known, but maybe that's safe. Maybe that's better. I didn't offend anybody as much. But I'm propping her up. I'm going to prop her up.
That was a good answer. Mention someone that isn't on anybody's radar. I actually haven't even heard of her before. I'm going to have to look into her, though, after this.
Yeah, go to Elect Noelle on Twitter. Elect Noelle. and she needs our help. She needs our support. She could use some help and some help propping up, her website or policies. If there's any graphic designers or web developers, Noelle could use some help. She could use some help from volunteers. So if that's something you're open to and you want to have a big impact, she doesn't have as big a structure as some of these other candidates, but you could help set that up, and that's a really cool thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Look it up, guys. Get involved. That's the best. That's the most, the best thing you can do is get involved in something. It makes you feel happy.
Yeah, it's good to help somebody. I mean, that's really what humans want to do, is we want to create and we want to help each other. We're very social beings. We thrive off that stuff. So get out there and help somebody and do something that's going to move the needle on things you care about.
Yeah. We're talking about just like the problems that are in institutions again. Like, I think to some degree, we haven't even realized how bad things actually are. But even with the acknowledgement that things are already so bad, like just in terms of when the virus first started, like people don't even trust the media enough or government leaders enough on both sides of the aisle. Like the left doesn't trust President Trump, the right doesn't trust the media, and ultimately nobody trusts anything. It's just total chaos and pandemonium. Nobody knows what the truth is. Like that in and of itself is such a sad world that in times when we need our institutions to work for us the most, we trust them the least. And I don't know. It really saddens me. I wish I had a better outlook on it.
It is sad. It is sad. I mean, we do need to move forward in a different direction. America's a tough place. We're gonna have a hard time with certain things because there's this whole, the dichotomy we were talking about, socialism, capitalism, right, left, all these things that we like to put ourselves in. That's a problem for America, is moving forward, because if you suggest anything that's like the government doing anything, that's socialism, And then if you go the other way, if you're like, yeah, private is good on this, like the private industry could fill this gap, then another portion of people freak out, and then you're like, like you basically like want people to die in the street or something. There's this very like polarized thing that we're in that's scary to me. That's like, how are we going to move forward to where we can trust our institutions to take care of us? I mean, it's something that we have to do. In other countries that are older than us, we're still pretty young. So other countries and areas of the world that are a bit older than us have figured out certain things. I mean, I'm kind of a fan of like the Scandinavian countries and the way that they view things, because, everything is taken care of. So they kind of don't have this, crazy view of government that I think that we do here, because with our government, it's become that they just take care of corporations and big businesses, it seems like, to most people. So we're like, well, they don't care about us. I don't trust them. They always just take care of somebody else. I never really get taken care of. And I feel like everybody feels that way in this country. And it's disturbing. Like the poor people feel that way for sure. They feel like we're not taken care of. Middle class feels that way. They're like, well, I just get all my taxes taken out and no one cares about me. I'm just the middle class. I just have to support everything. And then the rich feel that way. They're just like, well, give me all these bailouts and tax, write-offs. Like I need to be taken care of. And they're the ones that get it because they have the money. And so that's the unfortunate situation that we're in. And we need to fix the incentives it's going to be really difficult to gain that trust in institutions again.
Yeah. And I think like the amount of, you talked about how so many people are realizing it or have realized how the government really doesn't seem, the people that are in office right now don't seem to have our best interests at heart. And the sign of that even more so is just the fact that the Republicans picked Trump, who ran as an anti-establishment candidate that like when Yang says that Trump, it was the symptom of the problem, like that right there was a huge like red flag. Like, okay, people are so desperate that they're gonna go for this guy. And you see the same thing on the left, where there's such a anti-establishment, anti-corporate Democrat movement. And though they didn't win this time around, it's likely that they could win in 5 to 10 years. Like that right there should be kind of like a red flag to the parties, at least. Like, hey, nobody really likes what you guys are doing. Maybe you should get your priorities straight. But of course they aren't. I don't like saying this, but it seems like something, because it feels like Trump was the burning the thing down, but I feel like there's going to be perhaps inevitable, whether we want it to happen or not, there's going to be another huge, like, okay, things are burning down again. Because, I mean...
Yeah.
I'm
I mean,
at a loss.
I don't know either. I don't think anybody does know. We're just trying to do the best that we can with what we can do and try to, push things forward in our own way. And we're all doing the best that we can. None of us are going to be perfect, but we can do what we can do and focus on that. And I think that's really important, is to not focus on what we can't do, because there's tons of things outside of our control, but then there's also things in our control. So if we focus on what's in our control, then we'll always move the needle forward, and we'll see. I mean, it's interesting with like the whole Bernie movement and all of that. It's interesting. I think we're going to see that movement become stronger, and also become more radical. I don't know if the movement has enough actual people to, overtake the Democratic Party, just from what I've seen. There's still a huge portion of the Democratic Party that favors the establishment, the status quo, because they've benefited from it. They're in that age group and that income bracket where they've had some benefits from the status quo, and they don't necessarily see any reason for a radical change. And that's still the majority, and that's why you see candidates like Biden, coming out on top, because it's mostly older people that have been doing pretty okay, that end up voting. And then you have other movements of people that, consistently feel left out, like Trump's movement and Bernie's movement, I think have a lot of parallels. I mean, it's just right populism and left populism. It's definitely a different spin on it, but in the end, it's all about populism and like drain the swamp. These types of mentalities, or the establishment, the millionaires and the billionaires, like this is all the same language, but talking to a different group and, inciting them. So we have to be vigilant, I think, in America, to just be aware of what's happening with our society and not let us go far off the deep end, because I feel like a lot of countries in the world are worried that we're going off the deep end. From when I talk to my friends in Canada and Europe, Asia, other parts of the world, some of them are very concerned that we're going off the deep end with like a president like Trump, things he says, things he does, and the way that they see violence and in our country, and they feel like we're going a little bit off the edge. Oh, thank you guys. Thank you.
Yeah, that was good. Some good advice. Volunteer for something locally and try not to worry about the fact that our government is not working for us. Because I'm just gonna
just do what you can. Yeah, do what you can. I mean, we have to worry about it a little bit. Of course, we're going to. It's human nature, and we have to stay, aware. So you got to worry a little bit, but also like be proactive. Do what you can do to move things forward. And if everybody did what they could do to move things forward, I honestly don't think we'd be where we're at. Most people just don't do anything. They just do nothing. And
people they gotta feel empowered enough to act. That's like a lot of people might have a certain feeling on their minds, but to actually get to the point where you want to do something about it, that's a whole another step in and of itself.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people don't know what to do is a problem. There's a lot of people that do want to do something, but they don't know what to do, or they feel like they're not qualified. So they just kind of don't do anything. So that can be an issue. Can you hit the light again, please?
No such thing as qualified. Just get out there and do something.
Yeah, just get out there. Just absolutely get out there and do what you can do. There's local causes you can be active in. You can be creative. Like you could even fund your own local UBI. I mean, think about it. All you would have to do is get, like, if you want to do $1,000 a month, for example, you just have to raise 12 grand. You could raise 12 grand to get everybody, get somebody a UBI. Like you might know somebody in your neighborhood or community that would benefit from it. And you could actually probably do that. Like 12 grand is not that much to raise if you get the yang gang behind you on giving somebody a basic income that you think should have it. And then you can research it and tell everybody about how awesome it was. These are things that you can do. There's always something that you can do to move the needle and to be positive. And we need more of that. If we had everybody doing that kind of stuff, we'd be living in a different world.
Mm-hmm. I agree 100%, Heidi, and I really appreciate your positive message that you have brought here to the channel on Matt's Doomsday Friday evening.
No, it's cool. I get it. It's a very dark time. I mean, you know, like we know it. Like we're sad, we're depressed, we're locked up in this house all the time, like or wherever you're locked up in. Someone, you know, it's getting desperate, and you know what we have to do is just stay connected to each other and do things like this. You know, talk to people, have these conversations, especially with people you might not agree with or necessarily talk to. I think that if you talk face to face over video and you actually see that person and hear their story and listen to their lives, then you can realize we're a lot, you know, we're more similar than we are different. So we can make change together. We all basically have the same goals when you get all the way down to it. You know, there might be a few like random weirdos who have horrible like goals, but that's few and far between. For the grand majority of people are generally good people, just trying to like survive and like provide for themselves and their family.
Heidi, I really appreciate your time coming on here tonight to talk about your run for Congress, and I appreciate you for inspiring myself and so many other people. And
Awesome.
everybody, make sure you follow her on Twitter. It's at Heidi Briones, and like the video.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Matt. Always a pleasure. I hope to be on again in the future.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Take care, Heidi.
All right. Bye.